This is not your average waterfall table. It has subtle curves and design elements that make it stand out from the rest. All these subtle hints and design were achieved through some pretty useful tips and tricks for the hobbyist woodworker, and they'll all be explained throughout this video. Let's jump back to the beginning. My good friend Sean reached out and said he wanted to build a super tall waterfall table for his kitchen, but needed my shop to do so. So we went to the hardwood dealer and picked out some gorgeous poplar wood, which was way too large to fit in his Jeep. You can see how happy he is driving with it out his sunroof. These boards were huge and heavy, so the first thing we needed to do was break it down into more manageable pieces so it's easy to maneuver and fit on all of my milling tools. Accuracy isn't crucial here, as it's just rough dimensions to be trimmed down later, so the circular saw and the bandsaw were just fine for this application. Sean really meant it when he said he wanted to build it, so you'll see a lot of him and his fantastic beard going to town on wood throughout this build. In my shop, milling is done typically the same as most others. Flat face milling on the joiner first, then getting everything down to equal thickness on the planer before going back to the joiner for cleaning up one edge. Going to the planer before going back to the joiner allows you to pick what face you want to reference and choose what side you'd like to clean up first. We needed to keep these boards as wide as possible, so we took a little bit off at a time on the table saw until everything was nice and smooth. After all of the waterfall portions were milled, we began glue up while also paying close attention to grain selection, which allowed for the most consistent appearance in grain. Grain selection is absolutely key to obtaining that nice flow of grain over the edge of the waterfall. Once the glue dried, Sean spent a few hours sanding everything from 80 grit to 120 grit, just to have everything smooth and even since the glue up had a few hiccups. Using a straight edge and a circular saw, I snuck up on the 45-degree angle cut on both pieces. Sneaking up allowed me to get a clean, consistent cut and make sure the angle was actually 45 degrees. One of the problems we faced was how to reinforce and keep this joint aligned during glue up. I don't have a domino joiner and dowels are a little too finicky for precision work. We stuck some double-sided tape to a scrap piece of plywood and attached it to the top, bottom side of each miter. Using the ply as a straight edge, flat reference, I routed channels for some shop-made dominoes I have in the background. The channels were cut with a 1/4-inch downcut spiral bit, so if you do this, make sure to clean them out. The dominoes, or floating tenons, are just leftover walnut stock I milled to a 1/4-inch thick and just a bit thinner in width to allow for the side-to-side alignment. Using a chisel, the edges were chamfered to help ease into the mortised hole. After everything was prepped, we went to glue up and it went surprisingly well. The tenons held up super strong throughout the remainder of the build. Quick tip, if you're wanting to keep from having to clean up all the glue squeeze out from the interior glue line, use painter's tape and it'll keep it clean while drying. As I've said before, this isn't your average waterfall table. The decision was made to add a subtle angle to both sides of the leg portion, skewing inwards towards the bottom of the table for an elegant, simple touch. The next part is a little unconventional, but waterfalls don't have sharp corners, so this table won't either. We flipped the table over and added a 3/4-inch round over to the very bottom and the waterfall miter before moving on to the rest of the table with a 1/4-inch round over. We finally got to see things start taking shape with this soft pad adapter on the sander. It smoothed out everything without destroying the roundovers, and I definitely recommend doing this over hand sanding. As a final aesthetic choice, we decided to add hinges. Not actual hinges, but 1-inch picote dowels to give it the appearance of being on a hinge. Does it make sense? No. I do love it though. It's as simple as drilling a 1-inch hole and hammering the dowel with glue, then flushing everything up with a pool saw. On to finishing the first portion. You know what's better than a waterfall? A chocolate waterfall. So we use Rubio Monocoat's chocolate colored finish. A lot of people think poplar is just for painting, but I say don't be quick to underestimate the beauty in its grain. This took a while to apply, but we couldn't be happier with the results because it almost turned out to look like walnut. After it was complete, the waterfall portion was set to the side for a couple of weeks while I redid my shop. Oh yeah, I redid my shop. And I'll have a build on that soon too. It'll incorporate the cheapest way to build nice looking shop cabinets and setting up the new CNC. You definitely don't want to miss it, so make sure you do us a solid and like this video and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on. One trick when working with slightly wonky wood is to attach a straight piece of wood like this 2x4. It helps with losing too much material during milling and keeps grain consistent. The grain selection here was a little different, but done intentionally, utilizing the cool looking green grain poplar tends to produce. Using the new CNC, we carved a logo Sean made into the leg, and if you can't tell by said logo, he's an obvious car enthusiast. It's commonplace for the woodworking community to say CNC operators aren't real woodworkers. To that I say, I guess I'm no longer a real woodworker. All the years of power tool and hand tool work are just dust in the dust collector, never to be used again. Apparently. I didn't have a bit long enough to cut all the way through the material, so we cut as much as we could on the CNC, then moved it to the bandsaw to cut out the rest like a template. After some close calls on the bandsaw, the leg was flush trimmed on the router table, which was probably the most satisfying thing to do throughout this build. We used half the depth of the 3/4 inch roundover to create a thumbnail style profile. We added finish and the table support leg was complete, giving it a surfboard or wakeboard style appearance. Due to the leg's grain being oriented the same way as the rest of the table, modern looking L brackets were used to attach it and they worked flawlessly. I'm super happy with the turnout of this project and I know Sean is too. It's completely different yet simple. Sitting at 41 inches high, it's going to be great for company and get-togethers as well as being crazy enough to make a good conversation piece. If you enjoyed this build and want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe with notifications. There's quite a few builds in the works and you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching and happy building.